I like you, Steve, but something about this just it doesn't sit right with me. What's going on, everybody? I know this is a little bit of a change of pace, but it's your boy and host of the Sidelines Washington podcast here on our Sidelines Washington YouTube channel, Parker Hamlet. I know it's a little bit of like I said, a change of pace, trying to mix it up, do a couple new things as we kind of progress here throughout the season. Former Panthers and current NFL Network analyst Steve Smith has a little bit too much dip on his ship with his latest comments on Washington football team wide receiver Curtis Samuel. And first and foremost, let me just go ahead and list down the resume of Mr. Steve Smith here. Like I said, also NFL Network analyst now, 16 years in the National Football League, drafted by the Carolina Panthers back in 2001, 13-year Carolina Panther. He's 7th in all-purpose yards, 12th all-time in receptions. So, honestly, at some point going to get a yellow jacket, so let's not downplay his perspective too much. But he made an appearance here on 106.7 The Fan with Brian Mitchell and JP Finley. Of course, very critical leading into the matchup between the Washington football team and the Carolina Panthers. Talking a little bit about Rivera's 3 to 5 year plan, saying that y'all aren't going to make it 3 to 5 years. And, shit, I agree with you to an extent, Steve. Talking a little bit about the team's dysfunction within the building and, how the Washington football team has a heart issue, which, I expect no less from a former teammate of Cam Newton. But, the heart of the matter to me really boils down to Steve's perspective on Curtis Samuel. One being, and I quote him saying, "Y'all overpaid, good luck." So let's dive a little bit into that because, first and foremost, I don't see how the Washington football team overpaid for the services of Curtis Samuel. Mr. Steve Smith Sr. liked to say that the Washington football team paid $75 million for the services of one Curtis Samuel. That is not true. It is a 3-year, $34.5 million deal for the services of 24-year-old Curtis Samuel, which is a great value if you look at the overall market of the National Football League. So that's the first X for Mr. Steve Smith in that argument. Talks a little bit about Scott Turner's comfort, and you can make an argument for that, sure. He was also quoted in saying, "You don't get a parade averaging 46 catches, especially when you're unhealthy." Biggest reason that the Washington football team signed Curtis Samuel back during the free agency period is his versatility. 387 yards rushing in 13 years of Carolina with the Panthers for Mr. Steve Smith, and only 5 years as a pro. Curtis Samuel has 486 yards on the ground, making him a dual threat. And Curtis Samuel, dating back to his days with Ohio State, had 700 rushing yards and 700 receiving yards in one season, being the first to ever have 700 rushing yards and 700 receiving yards. Drafted back in 2017, double-digit games in 3 seasons with the Panthers. So if you want to talk about his health, he's had a lot of production, especially in those 3 seasons. Double-digit carries in 2019, 2020. Of course, 5 rushing touchdowns as well. Career year in 2020 last year with Carolina, 77 receptions. It seems to be a lot for a guy who apparently can't get more than 46 in a season. It kind of seems to me like Steve's trying to kick a guy while he's down here. We're only 2 months into the season here. Logan Thomas coming back this week. You also look at a guy like Curtis Samuel who should be able to come back soon. You look at his body of work in 2021, coming back a little bit too early against the Atlanta Falcons. 3 of his 4 catches for 19 yards were for first downs. So he brings that big playability to the offense. I can understand what Steve is trying to say, but, if you get him for an extended period of time, you look at a guy like DeAndre Carter, who's been flourishing the last couple of weeks. Those are some of the things that Scott Turner wants to do with a guy like Curtis Samuel. Is it Curtis's fault, Steve, that they let him come back too early? I think that's kind of an unfair thing to say. He opted to not get surgery. All we can do is assess the situation as it is right now. He also said that people aren't really shaking in their boots to play a guy like Curtis Samuel, and they never have, and they never will. Seems like a little bit of an overstatement there, Steve. Steve, it wasn't until your 3rd season as a pro that you eclipsed 1,000 yards, and we're talking about a Hall of Fame player here. Also, 3 years into his career, Curtis Samuel has found the end zone more than you, Mr. Smith. I'm sure if a lot of people like to write you off a little bit too early in your career, maybe we would never been able to see you play to that potential. Curtis Samuel was not brought to the Washington football team to be the wide receiver one of the Washington football team. That is Sir Terry McLaurin, the captain. And to top it all off, the thing that you started this all off being incorrect with, he is not being compensated to be wide receiver one of the Washington football team with a $34.5 million deal. And of course, there's the parallel that everybody's talking about here, and that's one Paul Richardson. I mean, look, that's even something I was saying earlier back in the season. I mean, you look back at Paul Richardson's career with the Seattle Seahawks, a measly 600 yards in his first 3 seasons there, and then in 2017 had a career year, kind of like Curtis Samuel did with the Panthers back in 2020. Of course, Curtis Samuel, Paul Richardson Jr. both got paydays with Washington. Paul's came back in 2018, where he played in his entire career for the Washington Redskins, 17 games. He is now out of football. He was also 25 years old at the time we signed him. But, you know, a lot like Curtis, Paul also was not brought here to be the wide receiver one for the Washington football team. At the time, we had guys like Jameson Crowder, Josh Doxson, never looked to be the wide receiver one. Paul also ended up being a cap casualty, but he also signed a 5-year, $40 million deal with the team, which was pretty good for the market at the time. Then you look at the parallels of the quarterback position. At the time, we had Alex Smith. He ended up going down with injury in the 2018 season. Ryan Fitzpatrick goes down first week of the season. So there are a little bit of parallels there. This overall 2021 free agency class has not really lived up to the standard that they were expected to come in as far as contribution. You look at Curtis Samuels last year in Carolina. You have Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore both eclipsing 1,000 yards. Curtis was always going to be the gadget guy. He was always going to be the odd man out. Curtis Samuel, you know, could have played on Sunday. That ended up not being the case. But either way, he is set to return here soon for the Washington football team and on a limited pitch count. So as far as Curtis Samuel is concerned, Mr. Smith, it is very much wait and see. Do you agree with Steve? Did they pay Curtis Samuel too much? Make sure you comment down below, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Looking forward to coming to you guys with more content like this. Moving on. Thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. But until then, this is the SSN signing off.